Well, welcome to the Northeast Regional Virtual Conference for the Social Studies. I'm Gorman Lee, co-chair, and today we're going to be looking at or discussing developing active global citizens. Um, Dr. Evan Saperstein, you're an adjunct professor at William Paterson University, and you're also a social studies teacher in New Jersey. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Okay, so I'm pleased to be here today to speak with you about preparing students to hold the office of citizen and particularly how to develop active global citizens. This presentation is based on my research from prior years. However, global challenges like the one we are experiencing right now with COVID-19 definitely test the global order and recent trend towards globalization. I do believe it is important to foster the principles of what I will define later as global citizenship, especially during this unprecedented crisis. Global cooperation remains imperative to address this pandemic and the aftermath. First, I'll be speaking about the three types of globalization: political globalization, economic globalization, and cultural globalization. Second, in my presentation, I will detail 6 common traits of a global citizen: global awareness, caring, cultural diversity, social justice, sustainability, and the responsibility to act. And finally, I will briefly discuss the findings from my study on global citizenship education at a secondary school in New Jersey, where I propose a secondary level elective course on global citizenship consisting of 10 units. At the same time, I will stress the need for more research on global citizenship education, global studies training and certification programs, experiential learning, and the connection between global citizenship and liberal democratic governance and values. So over the past few decades, with the rise of the internet, information has spread at an unprecedented rate. Through the flow of capital, goods, and services, the world has become an increasingly interconnected global system. The divides that once kept peoples and countries apart are now smaller and less recognizable. People, particularly of younger generations, are not as tied as much to their national or ethnic identities, and the concept of citizenship has expanded to include global belonging. In recent years, the idea of global citizenship has grown and developed into a nascent discipline known as global citizenship education. As a general matter, global citizenship education seeks to deepen understanding across different cultures through the study of current global issues. The modern global system traces back to the end of World War II. At the Bretton Woods Conference, 730 delegates from 44 countries agreed to foster cooperation through free trade and open markets. This led to the creation of the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and other trade organizations. Creating the United Nations and the European Coal and Steel Community and European Economic Community, which would become the European Union, demonstrated this commitment to global peace and security. Recently, the combined forces of nationalism, populism, and protectionism have threatened the post-World War II international system. This system has been challenged by the global financial crisis of 2008, the United Kingdom's vote to leave the EU, known as Brexit, and recently the global health pandemic. Despite recent trends and events, those who favor globalization still look to the United States and other leading powers of the international community to confront these pressing global issues and challenges. Over the past few years, multilateral institutions like the UN have taken steps to address these growing challenges. On September 25th, 2015, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution for transforming our world. The resolution included a list of 17 sustainable development goals. These goals include no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships. To meet these challenges, the UN General Assembly resolution calls for a, quote, spirit of global solidarity, end quote, one in which, quote, children and young women and men are critical agents of change and will find in the new goals a platform to channel their infinite capacities for activism into the creation of a better world, end quote. To realize these goals, including good health and well-being, will, however, require strong leadership and global cooperation. So now I'd like to briefly speak with you about globalization. To begin, in the course of my research, I examined three main types of globalization: political, economic, and cultural. Political globalization refers to what Professor of Global Studies Manfred Steger calls, quote, political interrelations across the globe, end quote. An example of political globalization is the EU. The EU focuses on aligning foreign and security policies, along with creating a common currency. Through the EU, European nations have created a shared identity for EU member state citizens. For instance, as the European Commission explains, EU citizens have the right to move and reside freely around the EU, the right to vote or stand as a candidate in elections to the European Parliament and in municipal elections in the EU country in which the individual resides, the right to protection by the diplomatic or consular authorities of any EU country in a third country, non-EU state, and the right to petition the European Parliament, to apply to the Ombudsman, and to write to any of the EU institutions or bodies. Other examples of political globalization are the USMCA, the African Union, the Association of Southeast Nations, and the Southern Common Market. They, however, do not provide the same transnational rights and freedoms that the EU does. While some have embraced global governance, others have been critical of it. Critics have argued that having allegiance to international institutions may lead to anarchy or undermine loyalty to a nation state. They are referring to global or transnational citizens that, quote, transcend the nation state, end quote. Second, economic globalization refers to what economist Gao Shengquan calls, quote, the increasing interdependence of world economies as a result of the growing scale of cross-border trade of commodities and services, flow of international capital, and wide and rapid spread of technologies, end quote. Examples of economic globalization include the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. Those who favor economic globalization cite an improved standard of living and other advantages, while critics focus on economic inequality and environmental concerns. Over the past few decades, economic globalization has brought individuals, neighborhoods, local communities, and nations together. Companies and corporations have increasingly spread to other parts of the world. As a result, citizens feel less isolated and more part of a global community. It is also true that international trade and foreign aid have helped a number of nations. Globalization has lowered poverty rates and increased economic growth in some countries and created a higher standard of living. According to the World Health Organization, global life expectancy has increased over the past few decades. At the same time, economic globalization has helped multinational companies acquire knowledge and refine business practices. Employees have had more opportunities to work off-site or live overseas and impact local communities. However, there are certain challenges when a corporation becomes multinational and no longer part of only a nation state. Economic globalization can have negative consequences for global citizens, including higher unemployment for failing companies and negative effects on the environment, health, and working conditions of citizens. Economic globalization also has created a growing disparity between the rich and poor and been unable to stop worldwide recessions. In response to these challenges, some scholars have called for a new type of global citizenship, which they call transnational activism. Some of these activists want to restructure or abolish the World Bank, IMF, and WTO, and have even proposed creating a world central bank. By the turn of the 21st century, more global activists have publicly protested against economic globalization in cities across the world, such as Prague and Seattle. And in 2011, in the wake of the global financial crisis of 2008, the anti-globalization movement intensified with Occupy Wall Street protests spreading from New York to the rest of the globe. In response to these types of protests, leading economist and professor of Columbia University, Joseph Stiglitz, has asked the following question: why has globalization, a force that has brought so much good, become so controversial? End quote. To address these types of challenges, Professor Schultz at the University of Gothenburg School of Global Studies calls for more global governance and regulation. He suggests upgrading the International Labor Organization and WTO, along with creating a global competition agency, World Financial Authority, World Environmental Organization, and Global Tax Office. The founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, adds that companies should commit themselves to global corporate citizenship. Despite these differing viewpoints on economic globalization, Jay Nelson, who is director currently of the Corporate Responsibility Initiative at Harvard University, explains that a responsible global corporation should commit to broader universal values, also reduce the economic, social, and environmental risks associated with operating a business overseas, develop new goods and services to benefit the company and society, and monitor progress in all of these areas. Third, cultural globalization refers to what author Lorraine Green calls, quote, the interconnectivity between the global and the local in terms of social practices and customs, end quote. It also refers to what sociologist Manuel Castel calls, quote, the emergence of a specific set of values and beliefs that are largely shared around the planet, end quote. These values and beliefs are spread through technology and mass media to create a global village, global culture, or world society. Cultural globalization has kept pace with the political and economic trends of globalization following World War II. Take the United States, for example, which has exported popular culture across the globe, including cinema, music, art, commercial products, food, sports, clothing, and the internet. During this time period, the world also has witnessed an unprecedented telecommunications or digital revolution that's redefined global borders. While some scholars see cultural globalization as a positive force that promotes progress, understanding, and diversity among global citizens, others consider it a threat to their local identity or culture and express skepticism that a global village, culture, or society exists in reality. Despite these differences, New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman stresses the continuing importance of culture in a globalized world, writing, quote, to reduce a country's economic performance to culture alone is ridiculous, but to analyze a country's economic performance without reference to culture is equally ridiculous, end quote. So as a result of these trends of globalization, a new concept has emerged known as global citizenship. Many organizations have defined the term, including UNESCO, UNICEF, and Oxfam. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, broadly defines global citizenship as, quote, belonging to a broader community and common humanity, and political, economic, social, and cultural interdependency and interconnectedness between the local, the national, and the global. The United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, assigns certain traits to a global citizen, including appreciation for diversity and global interconnectedness, desire to confront social inequities, and willingness to act meaningfully. Another multinational organization, Oxfam, includes similar characteristics when defining global citizenship, while also adding the following traits: concern for environmental problems, commitment to sustainability, ability to think critically and reason, appreciation and empathy for others to promote conflict resolution, and recognition of self-worth and identity. Associate Professor at Texas A&M University, Stephen Rayson, and Associate Professor at Transylvania University, Eva Katsarsa-Miller, also have put forth certain defining traits of global citizenship. They include global awareness, caring, cultural diversity, social justice, sustainability, and the responsibility to act. First, global awareness means understanding the interrelated nature of the world. And according to Gibson, Remington, and Landwehr-Brown, quote, refers to the knowledge of globalization and the resulting issues and problems that affect everyone's lives, end quote. Global citizenship requires global awareness to wrestle with the pressing economic, social, environmental, cultural, and ethical issues of the 21st century. In business and government circles, employers increasingly have stressed the importance of understanding different cultures and developing 21st century skills by, for example, studying abroad and working abroad. For instance, the Partnership for 21st Century Learning stresses that global awareness promotes collaboration in the workplace and broader community. Given the demands of a rapidly changing world, global awareness is increasingly necessary for American leaders and employees of various industries. Exhibiting global awareness also may create more career opportunities, improve decision-making, and enhance entrepreneurial and leadership skills. Another key component of global citizenship is caring, namely the ability to express empathy and understanding for others. Educational philosopher Nell Noddings explains that, quote, the demands of caring for involve not only immediate response, but also concern for the future, end quote. She adds that caring for requires us to respond to expressed needs and to monitor the effects of our actions and react anew to the responses of those we care for. Caring for the global community and humanity is a responsibility globally conscious citizens should share. According to UNESCO, one of the key learner attributes for a global citizen is, quote, to develop motivation and willingness to care for the common good, end quote. For instance, in the medical field, nurses care for a global population that transcends borders and cultural barriers. Lecturer and researcher Odessa Petit-Deriel concludes that, quote, being a global citizen and a cosmopolitan nurse requires participation in and valuing of the common good of society as a whole, end quote. Third, according to UNESCO, cultural diversity refers to the common heritage of humanity and, quote, is embodied in the uniqueness and plurality of the identities of the groups and societies making up humankind, end quote. James Banks, who is founding director of the Center for Multicultural Education at the University of Washington, Seattle, argues that each democratic nation state should encourage citizens to preserve their traditions and heritage as they participate in society and the global community. He also stresses the importance of citizens in diverse democratic societies being literate, thoughtful, ethical, and engaged citizens of their nation and the world. To confront 21st century challenges, science advisor to the Global Knowledge Initiative, Nina Fedorov, calls for the creation of a global knowledge society. Others, however, have expressed concern that shared global values may discourage cultural diversity or even undermine the character of local cultures and therefore serve to inhibit cultural diversity. Fourth, social justice refers to a process whereby every individual or group works to challenge oppression and receive the same opportunity. Certain scholars have tied the principle of social justice to a globalizing world and called for a cosmopolitan model of global justice that addresses various international challenges while preserving the national identity of citizens through social awareness and action. Fifth, according to the World Commission on Environment and Development, sustainability refers to, quote, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, end quote. This is relevant when addressing climate change and other environmental challenges. To better understand sustainability, business consultant and entrepreneur John Elkington used the business term triple bottom line and explained sustainability in environmental, financial, and social terms. First, through an environmental or ecological perspective, some scholars have recognized the responsibility citizens share in affecting our supply of natural resources and materials. Second, some scholars have examined sustainability from an economic standpoint. Ensuring long-term economic sustainability is critical at the organizational level as companies seek to adopt responsible management practices and strategies. Third, some scholars have examined sustainability from a social standpoint. Tying these concepts together, global citizens have an environmental, financial, and social responsibility to protect and safeguard the quality of life and rights of others through community initiatives. Finally, the responsibility to act refers to a citizen who, according to Oxfam, quote, knows how the world works, is outraged by injustice, and who is both willing and enabled to take action to meet this global challenge, end quote. Many global citizens feel a duty to initiate change, inspiring others to join this cause on their own volition. One of the more notable, wide-reaching examples of this commitment to act is the Global Poverty Project, co-founded by Hugh Evans and Simon Moss in 2008. Among the global citizenship initiatives of this project is the Global Citizen Festival, which brings world leaders, celebrities, and activists together to raise awareness and money for global causes. Moreover, the Global Citizens Initiative, founded by Ron Israel, strives to further the goals of global citizenship through advocacy, citizen engagement, and education. I would like to conclude today's presentation by briefly discussing the findings of my study on global citizenship education at a secondary school in New Jersey. As part of my research, I interviewed an administrator, teachers, and students. This slide provides an overview of my study, and I will return to this slide at the end of my presentation. Now, I'd like to discuss the findings of this study, which includes 5 superordinate themes and 15 sub-themes. They include developing and designing effective curricula in global studies and citizenship, content and pedagogy. 2, preparing effective teachers of global citizenship. 3, developing global citizens through effective teaching, including maintaining objectivity, flexibility, student choice, utilizing technology, critical thinking, and experiential learning. The next finding is fostering global citizenship traits, which include global awareness, caring, cultural diversity, social justice, sustainability, and the responsibility to act. And then 5, we have impact of global citizenship education, including the impact of global citizenship education on teachers and the impact of global citizenship education on students. The first superordinate theme deals with the development and design of the accelerated global studies curriculum at the research site. The water management crisis, genetically engineered foods, free trade and globalization, and human rights comprise this 2-year interdisciplinary and interdependent curriculum. The curriculum follows the New Jersey Core Curriculum Content Standards and Common Core State Standards. It also includes various interdisciplinary lessons and assessments. The first sub-theme focuses on content and pedagogy related to the global studies curriculum, as the administrator and 2 teachers discuss how they teach the course. Some prefer to teach more topics and provide less details, while others prefer to teach less topics and provide more details. They also mentioned which of the UN Sustainable Development Goals they would incorporate in a year-long course, agreeing that they should include units on world hunger, education, clean water and sanitation, and climate action. The teachers expressed that and explained that their curriculum can serve as a model for other schools seeking to create a global studies elective. The next theme deals with how to prepare effective teachers of global citizenship. Being well-versed in several disciplines, attending professional development courses and workshops, having a social science background, and gaining direct exposure to current university research all play an important role in preparing these teachers. According to the weight of the interviews, developing global citizens requires that teachers be objective, flexible, offer choice, utilize technology, spur critical thinking, and foster experiential learning. Teachers avoid incorporating their own opinions so students can form their own thoughts and beliefs. Teachers also present both sides of a particular issue, for example, learning about Walmart or Stonyfield Farm, were examples that were provided in the interviews that I conducted. Teachers also changed their lesson plans based on what is taking place around the world, which requires teachers conduct research and follow current events. This shows how important it is for global studies teachers to be creative and not stick to a certain script. And the example that I'm providing here was a teacher who was teaching in 2011 and would talk about events that were going on around the world and try to incorporate that into the curriculum, such as what was happening at the Fukushima atomic power plant and the Arab Spring. In addition, teachers provide choices to students for various assessments by incorporating art, music, and technology into the curriculum. Some students prefer creating a website, writing a song, or completing an interactive activity. Teachers also use social media and technology in the classroom so students acquire 21st century skills and become more comfortable with technology. The administrator pointed out that students feel more comfortable learning about global issues by conducting research online rather than reading a newspaper. Furthermore, students should look at multiple sides of an issue, conduct in-depth analysis, and determine the accuracy and relevancy of information. Critical thinkers also should be open-minded, willing to listen to multiple sides, capable of examining and deconstructing an argument, and accepting of more than one answer to a particular problem. Experiential learning is the next theme I'm going to talk about. Students obtain knowledge, skills, and values through experiential learning activities. The International Baccalaureate Creativity, Activity, and Service Project, or the CAS project, and other assignments have helped students make a difference in their community. They've applied what they learned in the classroom and give back to the community by volunteering at local organizations and participating in after-school programs. Two of the students even expressed interest in starting a humanitarian club. The study participants addressed the following character traits of global citizens: global awareness, caring, cultural diversity, social justice, sustainability, and the responsibility to act. First, students should keep up with world events and be constantly exposed to these issues to affect change and better understand their roles and responsibilities within the community. The administrator stressed the importance of these courses in fostering global awareness and helping students understand their place in the global community, and suggested that students at least take 1 year of global studies courses to become aware of these issues. Second, students should care about global issues that do not directly affect them and consider these issues, as well as help citizens around the world and the environment. The teachers found it difficult over the course of the interviews to get students in their class to care even when explaining the significance of these global issues. And they provided many examples of this difficulty. Third, schools should be more culturally responsive and inclusive for their students by focusing on various regions of the world through their IB program. This will benefit every student at the school, including English language learners. And in the IB program, students have the option of studying issues related to Asia, Oceania, the Americas, and Africa. Fourth, students should study human rights and be exposed to issues of equity, justice, and ethics in order to become justice-oriented global citizens. Ethical issues and questions were raised for consumers during the study by the participants, including Coca-Cola privatizing large reserves of water around the world and child labor being used in the cobalt industry. Fifth, students should learn about sustainability by, for instance, identifying ways to conserve water or discuss the pros and cons of vegetarianism. By debating these topics in class, students were able to better understand how to meet the needs of today without impairing the needs of the future. And sixth and finally, students should be willing to take risks and serve as active participants in the community, even if the issues do not directly affect them. By debating issues related to fair trade and free trade, such as unethical labor practices, the exploitation of child labor, and pesticides that impair health, students can reflect on their responsibility to take action. Global citizenship education has impacted the perceptions and life experiences of teachers and students as well. For teachers, some mentioned how they better understand what it means to be a global citizen after teaching a global studies course, are more inclined to act and help out, and in some cases, even change their eating habits as a result of teaching these courses. For students, some mentioned learning about meaningful topics such as child labor, the exploitation of workers, free trade and globalization, and the water management crisis. The student-centered classroom activities, such as the fishbowl activity, debates, Socratic seminars, also help students formulate their views on topics related to global citizenship education. They now have a greater understanding of global issues and are more willing to solve problems. Some students, for instance, have told their parents and family members not to buy certain products from free trade companies. These courses also have had and can have an impact on their college majors and careers. One of the administrator's former students who graduated a few years ago attended American University and studied in the International Studies program at the School of International Service. The administrator believed that the only reason she decided to pursue this major was because of the 4 years of global studies courses that sparked her interest. The final part of this presentation will cover the main findings of this study, recommendations for practice, and recommendations for future research. The first finding focuses on the growing need to include topics and current global studies and citizenship-related content in the high school curricula across the United States. Although there's not much literature about high schools in the United States that have incorporated global citizenship education or global studies into their curricula, other than a few schools, the research site with its clear and defined curriculum can serve as an example for other schools. At the few schools that offer global citizenship education, or variant thereof, students tend to take a half-year or full-year course on relevant subjects. By contrast, the multi-year curriculum at the research site is more ambitious. But the absence of a 2-year or 2 to 4-year curriculum does not and should not prevent schools from at least trying to achieve the objectives of global citizenship education. A half-year or full-year course can obtain desired student learning outcomes and stress similar content knowledge and skills. And given that so few schools currently offer global studies courses, it is more likely than not that if they were to offer such a course, it would at least initially be part of a half-year or full-year sequence. This study has also confirmed the importance of incorporating global citizenship education in K-12 curricula across the United States. In September 2017, the Vermont Agency of Education recognized this imperative by making global citizenship education the centerpiece of its K-12 social studies curriculum. Indeed, the areas of civics, economics, geography, world language, cultural studies, and history now all fall under the umbrella of global citizenship. This commitment to global citizenship education can serve as an example for other state curricula across the country. The second finding focuses on the increasing importance of preparing high school teachers across the United States to teach global studies and citizenship-related courses and content. Too often, teacher education programs in the United States fail to impart the relevant knowledge, skills, and values needed to teach global citizenship education. Teachers then are ill-prepared to discuss basic multicultural or global concepts in the classrooms or incorporate these ideas into their lesson plans. Therefore, pre-service teachers need more exposure to global issues and more majors, concentrations, and certificate programs devoted to global studies and global citizenship education. In-service teachers also need more professional development programs in global education. While there are some colleges and universities that currently offer certificate programs in global education, such as Teachers College at Columbia University, New York University, and Seton Hall University, there should be more programs at institutions of higher education. Some states, such as North Carolina, offer professional development hours in global education. The IB also can help in this endeavor by providing pre-service and in-service training. The third finding focuses on the significance of experiential learning and other forms of pedagogy to global studies and citizenship-related education. It's based on the 4 stages of the ELC model developed by David Cole. The first in this model refers to the participants, and these participants discuss their new and different experiences, which relates to concrete experience. Second, the participants reflected on their experiences, which is known as reflective observation. Third, they explained how they conceptualized their experiences, which is known as abstract conceptualization. And fourth, they applied what they had learned to impact their community, which is known as active experimentation. The need to expand commonly accepted traits of a global citizen to include the embrace of liberal democratic governance and rights is my fourth finding. And some of the definitions on global citizenship from UNESCO, UNICEF, and Oxfam do not focus on the importance of liberal democratic governance and values, and fail to mention liberal democracy. These principles include having an independent judiciary, providing freedom of the press, applying the rule of law, and creating a protected space for secular and religious groups, to name a few. In other words, there's only so much that the world can achieve without companies, people, countries, and institutions adopting liberal democratic governance and values. Global studies courses that fail to cover the role of democracy in effecting such change fail to fulfill the goals and aims of global citizenship education. And of course, this is especially important nowadays, given the current challenges to globalization and liberal democracy taking place around the world. Not only have many world leaders rejected some of the tenets guiding global citizenship and liberal democracy, many citizens in different countries have expressed their skepticism as well. The rise of illiberal democracy and the embrace of authoritarianism in some cases by younger generations, as evidenced by different studies and publications, is alarming and makes it more difficult for global citizens to effect positive change. That is not to say, however, that undemocratic countries have not helped tackle global problems in the past, or that they cannot help in the future. We can and should still work with illiberal or undemocratic countries to address some sustainable development goals, such as confronting world hunger, poverty, and climate change. The Paris Agreement is an example of this necessary cooperation. And that is not to say also that liberal democratic governance is without its flaws, or that the merits of democracy should be free from scrutiny or debate. These shortcomings of liberal democracies should be addressed in the future. Nevertheless, with human history and experience as our guide, to realize all the goals of global citizenship requires a commitment to liberal democratic governance and values, be they freedom of expression, the rights of women and minorities, and other basic human rights. It is my contention, therefore, that high schools across the United States should design and implement a new elective course on global citizenship education, and liberal democratic governance should be a key component of the course. The fifth finding focuses on the mounting imperative of global citizenship education for high school students across the United States. The research site has cultivated student interest in global studies and citizenship through the IB and courses they offer. The IB, some states and school districts, along with student clubs at the local level, have recognized the need to cultivate student interest in global studies and citizenship. Wisconsin and Illinois, for instance, can serve as examples, since they offer certificates to students who take courses and engage in service learning activities related to global studies. In public schools across Massachusetts, students also may join clubs, participate in study abroad or service learning activities, and apply for global certificates. Through the above findings and literature, this study has proposed a half-year or full-year high school elective course with the following 10 units. 1, Introduction to Global Citizenship. 2, Sustainable Development. 3, Poverty and World Hunger. 4, Global Health Issues. 5, Child Mortality. 6, Peace and Conflict. 7, Human Rights and Gender Equality. 8, Universal Education. 9, Liberal Democratic Governance and Rights. And 10, Global Citizenship Action Plan. I'd like to quickly review each unit of the course. The first unit should define the meaning of global citizenship. Students should discuss the attributes of a global citizen and the objectives of global citizenship. As part of this exercise, students should read and analyze UN SDG number 4.7.1. Students also should write an essay on what it means to be a global citizen. The second unit should cover sustainable development. Students should work in groups and examine key environmental, economic, and social issues affecting the well-being of the global community. The third unit should explore poverty and world hunger. Students should identify the underlying causes of these problems, as well as offer prescriptions through international partnerships and agreements to improve food security and reduce poverty and hunger worldwide. Students also should conduct independent research via online resources and databases, and should complete certain projects. In light of the recent global health pandemic, I believe the fourth unit is particularly relevant. The fourth unit should cover global health issues, namely epidemics, as well as examine the various types of prevention and training and treatment programs. Students should explore ways that the global community can confront health issues in underdeveloped nations, as well as increase sources of funding to combat disease. Students should also design an action plan to combat a health epidemic and present their findings to the class. The fifth unit should examine the issue of child mortality, particularly in the developing world. Students should consider solutions and ways that children under the age of 5 can have better access to healthcare. Students should conduct research and simulate a mass media campaign to educate their peers. The sixth unit should examine issues of peace and conflict on a global scale, considering theories and practices of peace building, conflict resolution, and conflict transformation. Students should learn about the role of local, national, and global institutions in shaping peace and security worldwide through a series of role-playing scenarios and simulations. The seventh unit should address human rights and gender equality. As part of this unit, students should consider the international human rights system and the evolving definition of gender equality, as well as related principles set forth by the United Nations Evaluation Group. Students should design a social media campaign and should explore the connection between liberal democracy and human rights or gender equality. The 8th unit should examine universal education. Students should investigate recent efforts by international groups and organizations to expand educational opportunity. Students should propose recommendations to overcome educational inequities and, as part of this pursuit, collaborate through a problem-based learning project on a local, national, or even global initiative. The 9th unit should teach students about the liberal democratic ideas expressed in both the English and the US Bill of Rights. Among other seminal documents, students then should create their own Bill of Rights for the community of global citizens, incorporating the ideas and topics discussed in previous units. Students also should discuss the importance of liberal democratic governance and rights, such as the freedom of the press, the freedom of speech, the rights to peaceful assembly and association, as well as other forms of expression. And finally, in the 10th unit, students should work on a prior or current global initiative. This final project, where students, for instance, draft a research paper or create a website, should be presented to the class. The purpose of this project should be to design and implement a plan of action on a pressing global issue. Through the above findings in literature, this study also has proposed that high schools incorporate global citizenship education into one or more of the 5 following areas: school leadership, teaching and learning across the curriculum, extracurricular activities, school and community relationships, and school culture. First, school leaders should set the tone and serve as an example for teachers and students seeking to incorporate global citizenship education by becoming well-versed themselves in these issues at workshops and conferences. Second, teachers can incorporate global citizenship education by working with colleagues and creating interdisciplinary lesson plans. Third, students should join extracurricular clubs that support the objectives of global citizenship education. Fourth, schools should encourage students to build partnerships with other high schools, institutions of higher education, government agencies, or international organizations to affect change in the community. Fifth, schools should support the goals of global citizenship education by including the objectives in the mission and vision of the school and building a democratic community. This study highlights the need for more research within the field of global citizenship education as well. First, more researchers should conduct studies related to the development and design of global studies curricula and courses. Second, more studies should focus on global studies teacher training programs across American institutions of higher education and other organizations. This includes examining the teacher certification and licensing requirements in states across the country and prescribing ways to incorporate global citizenship education into these requirements. Third, more researchers should conduct studies on the ways that schools and other organizations promote global citizenship education outside the classroom to cultivate student interest and foster civic engagement. Fourth, more attention should be given to global citizenship education within American public high schools, in addition to private and charter schools as well. And finally, more studies should better define the ideals and values that constitute global citizenship education. Once again, this slide provides an overview on my study related to global citizenship education. I will return to this slide in a moment. This concludes my presentation. Now I will be happy to take a few questions.
A lot of research. It's great.
Thank you.
I was curious, like you've kind of developed this elective course or this global education course in the school that you're teaching at, right? Correct? Or were you looking at other schools that have developed the global education?
Yeah, so I've looked at other schools. So I did my study at a particular school that developed a global studies curriculum. I haven't, and I'm in the process of designing. I've written out the curriculum, but I'm in the process of trying to get this approved. And my school currently offers a contemporary world issues course, which is a half-year course, and then another half-year course on human rights. But this would be a little bit more robust on some of the topics I discussed, such as poverty, world hunger, sustainability, a little bit more interdisciplinary. However, I do think it would fit in the social studies department, in the social studies department, of course, because most of the topics are related to social studies issues. Of course, there are science and environmental areas as well.
So you also observed these global citizen education courses at the other schools, or was it just through interviews that you were able to glean information from?
Yeah, so I looked at one particular school district that has a global studies curriculum. I've also scoured the literature and reviewed, and I've interviewed both the designers of the curriculum and teachers of those 4 courses. But I've also scoured the literature and reviewed other schools around the country by examining their curricula and the syllabi that they offer, which offer both half-year and full-year courses on global studies or global citizenship education. There aren't that many schools that offer a course specifically devoted to global citizenship education. I've also looked at how other countries around the world teach and incorporate global citizenship education into their curricula, such as how Canada, Japan, and the United Kingdom have done that. Other countries, like the ones I just mentioned, have a more robust GCE curriculum. So I'm hoping that through my study, I can help schools incorporate a curriculum and a course like this, and also, of course, learn from how other schools around the country who've done it already, even though there aren't that many, and other countries, how they're doing it as well.
So these courses that have been developed in these other, like, is it a project-based approach? Is it like this, are students actually developing a project, like a culminating project at the end of this course? Are they doing like a research, presentation, or do they select a particular topic of their choosing, like to focus on with their project? Or I'm just trying to figure out what the end product is at the, with students.
Right. So this is obviously my vision, and I'm hoping schools will adopt it. So the way I kind of envision it is either offering a 20-week half-year or 40-week full-year course with those 10 units, however you want to break it up, 2 or 4 weeks per topic. And then the idea is at the end of the course, students will use all the knowledge that they gained to present through a research paper or a presentation or creating a website, their culminating project on one of the topics that they selected at the beginning of the course. So it is project-based, but also incorporates other forms of learning, such as experiential learning, where they go into their communities, local communities, and try to learn about a particular topic. So like if, for example, we're looking at sustainability, or I mentioned before, water management, they can do something at the local level that will give them a great understanding of that topic. Or, I mean, there's a whole host of things that they could do in this course. But the way I kind of envision it is they learn these topics throughout the course, and then they focus and hone in on one area that they present to their peers the last couple weeks of the course. Now, it depends on how you want to structure it. It could be 2 or 4 weeks, let's say, but if you're doing a full year course, let's say probably the month of June would be just devoted to those presentations.
They're like how do you envision like this course being offered at the high school level? Is it open to like freshmen to seniors? Is it really more geared for like a senior, like a capstone type of course where, maybe the prerequisites was taking, some of the other courses that they've taken earlier in the high school year? I mean,
yeah, I particularly think that this would be a course that should be offered predominantly for juniors and seniors, so 11th and 12th grade. It could be a capstone project. I think the point of this course is to prepare students when they're leaving high school. So maybe when they go to college or after they graduate from college, they have a greater awareness of global issues. Doesn't mean that they're going to major in global studies or international studies when they go to college, but it might pique their interest to study abroad, work abroad in the future, learn a foreign language, learn about other cultures, and just gain a greater understanding of the world. There really isn't, unfortunately, many courses that specifically hone in on these main issues. And if you noticed at the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And much of the units are tied and linked to those goals, which were developed in 2015 and are supposed to be, and we're trying to achieve over the next 15 years by 2030. So I think that you could offer it for 9th and 10th graders as well, but I think that juniors and especially seniors would benefit from a course like this. Now, the research site where I did my study has 4 year-long courses. So they offer it for freshmen through seniors. However, for the students who are in the IB program, they are on an accelerated track. They do those courses in 2 years. So they do, instead of doing 1 course each year, they do the freshman and sophomore year, they take 2 of the courses each. And then their junior and senior year, they do all the IB requirements. Because it was an IB school where I conducted my study. So there's many different ways you can do this. I do think, though, it should be offered as a survey course. And again, hopefully students will take out of this course something that they might pique their interest to pursue a major in global health or one of the topics that are listed here. So it's not, we don't go into great detail on any of these issues. These are kind of 2 to 4 weeks survey of these topics, and then they can hone in on one issue that they're particularly interested in, as like a capstone project, for example, as you mentioned. You have a question? Yes.
Yes. In terms of looking at global citizenship, we are very connected as a globe now by the internet and what we see, unlike if we were coming out of World War II, and
Right.
the difference in positioning with communication and with products and economies, and looking at the stability or instability of governments. In teaching global citizenship, what is the muscle fiber that we're building on from K through 12 to get to this point where some of this really can resonate with students? And cultural relativism, the idea of what innovation is is intersecting with students in other places. I see it well laid out, but in terms of thinking like a globe and its operation and the many different fragments that make that globe up, how are we going to approach this in a manner where it really will make sense to the children and they automatically understand that they're global citizens from babies growing up? That's my question to you.
Yeah.
What's your hierarchy thinking on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, as you said, a lot of this can be theoretical for students, especially at an age of 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. So we want to make it relatable to them so they can actually apply what they're learning into their communities, right? Because the goal here is learning through experience. So let's say we teach them about cultural relative pedagogies and culturally sensitive topics that are stuff that they would probably have more opportunities to learn about in college and in grad school. We can still apply those concepts in a high school elective course. We just have to be judicious in how we approach it, because again, we're not going to, for example, how are we going to teach these topics? You could have a textbook, but also I think the best way to do this is to share articles. They could be a couple page articles. They have, like at my school, for example, they have access to the online scholarly databases through our media center page. I'm sure almost every school has that. So giving them opportunities to learn how to research and look these topics up, to explore differences of opinion, how culturally relevant pedagogy are important for them to understand the world we live in today. And again, connected to social justice topics that are going on right now in the world. I think one of the cool things about a course like this is, let's say we were teaching this course last year, or in the spring, when a lot of the events that were taking place with respect to social justice protests around the world, and of course the United States, were going on. that would be a good opportunity for them to kind of go into their community and really apply what they're learning, and then maybe do some type of capstone project on that. So it's supposed to be relevant and current, and the other cool thing about this course is that it's constantly evolving because of what's going on. So when I designed this course, this was before COVID-19, and I mentioned in my presentation, the fourth unit is so relevant now more than ever before. So something like this might inspire students to major in that and become a infectious disease expert in the future, or do something in global health just because of what's going on right now. So it's to pique their interest, but also, as you said, it's to help them understand about cultural differences and how we're supposed to navigate through this ever-changing world.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I really appreciate what you've laid out in terms of how we focus in on the spaces we occupy. If we're looking at local, national, and then global, I personally, and I could be wrong, I would think that we're part of a globe, and then national, and then local. If we're looking at it, if we're going to make global citizenship a real thing for people to really take in, then our responsibility becomes that the larger realm, and then zeroes in, as you're saying, like on those particular projects that people, that the students would then undertake. But in terms of looking at, for instance, my son-in-law is from Zambia, and looking at the landscape of education in Zambia and environment and what that entails. And I would want my students to understand what the government thinks of this, what is a plan of the government to approach equal education and a more expansive education with innovation, and those kind of concepts that make the connection of the Zambian students to the American students a possibility in expanding both horizons. So understanding that, and the wealth gaps that are there and the cultural resources that are there is a part of what could be a reference, because as Americans, I find us so isolationist in many ways. And so
I agree.
So in terms of that, how would we cultivate this idea of immigrant movement of people around the globe, of relocations of cultures as people move, as we absorb in America even global issue through people who come here, how that understanding of a moving, never static entity of being global citizens. How do we do that with this? And I just think it's so interdependent upon many things. So my question really lies in, what are our prerequisites for what this course can sit on?
So let me address that, your first question, then I'll address that as well. First off, I can just tell you from my own experience, I agree with you 100%. I grew up in the New York area. I grew up in New Jersey, but I did my undergraduate degree at McGill University in Montreal. I did French immersion in Quebec City while I was a student at McGill University. Then I taught a year in Paris, France, learned about how their education system is structured at the high school level before coming back and doing my master's degree at Columbia and then my doctorate at Northeastern. And what I learned through my experiences, both in teaching in studying in Quebec and studying French, and also teaching and studying in Paris, France, is that we are very isolated as a educational system, but also as a country. You notice that, and I noticed this, I had students who were, again, similar to the age that I teach here in the United States, in France, who were very much knowledgeable about what's going on in the United States and what's going on around the world. we have some students who are very knowledgeable about what's going on in the world, but I do find that our educational system as a whole, and again, it's hard to generalize, but the United States educational system is less focused on global issues and more focused on our own history, which makes sense in some ways, but also doesn't make sense. Because if you're gonna say, I don't know, like for New Jersey, as an example, we offer 2 years of required US history courses and 1 year of world history. In Massachusetts, is that the same? Because most states do it 2 years. I think over 40 states do it that way. And if you think about it, you're trying to teach thousands of years of global history in 1 year, and then you're teaching a few hundred years of American history in 2 years. So there's something we can look at just from a historical history curriculum standpoint. But how do we then connect it to what's going on around the world? So I think you mentioned a good example about Zambia. I mean, you can look at so many countries around the world, and I have a unit on universal education. So one thing we could do, especially now with how everything's done virtually, I think especially in the last year, more so than ever before, is finding like-minded educators, finding students who are interested in learning about how these issues are being taught in other countries, and forming some type of network where you can do, and again, there's time zone differences, but try to find some type of way you can connect with teachers and students in other countries to learn about how they teach the wealth gap and economic and environmental issues affecting the world. Because again, the whole point of this course is that even though, of course, we need to know about what's going on locally and nationally, we need to understand that we're all on the same planet, we all share the same resources, and we're never going to fix climate change and all the other issues that I mentioned without having a global approach. That's also why I said we have to work with countries that are not democracies. See, we can still stand up for liberal democracy, liberal democratic values, and say that gender equality, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, all these things are necessary and really important in a vibrant society. But at the same time, we have to work and cultivate with those who don't necessarily share those values and find common ground. So that's why I think students should, because I've looked at studies that show that young students, particularly those who are graduating high school and then also in college, are less eager and enthusiastic about democratic institutions and more open to authoritarian ideas. Now, again, this is a few studies I've looked at, but my point is that we've seen a lot in the last 15, 20 years, a lot of countries that were democracies and have trended towards either illiberal democracies or in some cases authoritarian regimes where the leader gets elected democratically and then a few years later they start changing the constitution and eventually they start restricting freedom of the press and other things like that. So we have to explain that to students. This is a very complicated world that we live in, and in order for us to be active global citizens, we need to work and find common ground in all these areas. So setting up some type of virtual lessons where you can connect with those and learn about those systems of education, I think is really important, because I can just tell you from my own experience, this is what prompted me to develop a course like this, having studied and taught in Canada and in France.
Right. Well, I think it's very, I think it's well thought out. But in terms of what I'm asking about when I talk about prerequisites, you know, that imperialism and colonialism and white supremacy has like affected the entire globe in terms of possession of places and sustainability of governments to even stand up and to be able to offer to the citizenry of those countries any services and needs that become apparent because of the type of oppression that has been worldly practiced and against human rights, if you will. Just looking at the Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations and its 30 articles. When we look at that, we're looking at something that is general in its placing that every human being has a right to exist, for instance, on the globe. You have that in article number 6, and you look at that as a practice that is complicated and complex across countries and the way that they govern. And even in some countries, children being sacrificed because there's a belief system that is one that's built on superstition about some children being cursed. And I mean, there's this plethora of things that are there and variables that that interfere with some of the kind of like straight line thinking, if you will. This is so complex a thing that it would appear to me that there need to be some reality checks with respect to how we teach this, in requiring students to understand more about political systems, political movements, and like the shared even 500-year history of even the Western Hemisphere and European intervention. And so how do we then place this course so that students are not in the naivety of saying, what I'm going to say, my project is going to work, because without understanding the complex nature of the globe that we live in, the belief systems of people, the cultures, the political systems, all of that you talked about in many ways is like there are so many segments that could happen. If we even taught at a fourth grade level, there are 9 systems in the body with regard to a human body. Or we talked about the geography of the globe to 4-year-olds and open that world to them, then they understand that there's some continental differences. There's that. How do we build from there the students who can, by the 12th grade, grasp what you're saying? I think that there has to be some fundamental reformation within the educational system to get that global course that you're talking about.
Yeah, so I think that part of it comes down to, we were mentioning this at the beginning before even the presentation began, rewriting curricula so they reflect these important concepts, like you said. In a world history course, a big chunk of it should be devoted to colonialism and imperialism and how that's impacted developing nations around the world over the last 100, 200 plus years. But in an elective course like this, which either is half year or full year, obviously you're not going to have the time to go in depth on all that. So there has to be some type of way that students are getting this material of course, in addition to what they're learning in this elective course. So number one, it's learning about what happened, and then trying to find a way that you can share with them relevant articles that they can appreciate these differences, these cultural differences that exist around the world. I'll give you an example. I've studied GCE, Global Citizenship Education, and there's a lot of Global Citizenship Education that's devoted to critical GCE, or critical pedagogy, which focuses on, there's a famous scholar, her name is Andreotti, and she talks about the influence of colonialism and imperialism and how it's impacted the wider world, and how that needs to be a key component of GCE. So including these authors in the discussion on each of these topics. So students are reading and digesting this material, because at the end of the day, how are they going to get them doing a project is not enough, right? They need to be trained to think a different way, to understand that the structures that are in place over the last many years are reflective of a certain worldview, and how you go to other parts of the world and that's not the way they're taught, or not the way that actually reflects what's going on right now. So I think it has to be done within a social studies curriculum broadly, but the course itself should be the culmination of that. That's how I envision it. So that's why I say 11th and 12th grade, specifically probably 12th grade, because let's say freshman year or sophomore, junior year, they're taking courses that kind of build up to this course. It gives them that background information that they can then apply to the global community, right? Not just the local and national.
I was just speaking from my own artist residencies in other parts of the world. Costa Rica, for example. In Costa Rica, the educational system in terms of social studies involves the children from the time that they begin school to understand that this is a globe that they live in, and that people from different places have different ways of living and thinking. And as an artist being in that space, I found the children really very immersed, that I was exposed to, in a place called Lima. Limon is the name of it, where there are Jamaican immigrants who've moved to that area when they were building the railroads in Costa Rica, and the sharing of the kind of thinking across differences with those who were um, uh, um, Spanish descended and those who were African descended, had this mixture of culture that was amazing. And in terms of respect for each other and the way that they politicize themselves, even using the work of Marcus Garvey and a foundation there, and that is currently still in effect in terms of their political their elections of people who get elected in that area. And so there's this layer that I was exposed to that really helped me to understand how young children take in ideas about where they are and their relationship to the world. And so I'm just saying that, having been in Costa Rica, France, and some other places in Africa, that there's some change with respect to understanding I'm a global citizen from the beginning has to be a core part of the curriculum, that not an add-on, like not an elective.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like we're electing to be, we are.
And I agree with you. In a perfect world, this will be a required course. I'm just at this point being realistic that we're going from a place where courses are not even offered at all to a place that let's start out making an elective course, and hopefully one day we can create a curriculum where this is instrumental. Like I mentioned Vermont, that I mentioned this in 2017, they renamed their social studies department or discipline global citizenship or global citizen education. So that's kind of what we need to do. That should be the end goal. I know you asked me for my email. I'll put my email address on the screen here.
Okay. But I just wanted to make one more point, that we're behind our internet capabilities, where the children are listening to world music and comparing cultures and comparing ideas as we create these spaces for education.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you, and this is really something I'm passionate about, and So I saw there were some other questions as well that.
I'm just going to say, I think I'm going to develop, because my school has flexibility. I want to just develop off of those 10, because you showed the themes and the sub themes, but I was like, let me just develop my own course based off of those, even if it's just a one-day introduction to each kind of thing. Just because in the Massachusetts social studies, it's like kindergarten, a little bit of first, second. You could incorporate these, but then 3, 4, 5 doesn't really work. And then 6 again. So I'm thinking if I work with 5th graders, because we have this experimental 20-day block of an hour each, even just to have them understand what that means. Because I think they know what child mortality is, and they're going to be horrified, but duh, it happens all the time. But,
right. I mean, you show them the statistics around the world with respect to standard of living, cost of living, poverty, how much the average person makes in a given day in certain parts of the world, and they'd be surprised, in some cases shocked. So the nice thing about something like this is you could design a one-day lesson just to kind of give an introduction to each of these topics, and you could do it over the course of a month or a few weeks, or if you delve into it over the course of a couple marketing periods or a year. So there's a lot of flexibility here. I'm happy to hear, your input and everyone's input on this, because this is something I'm really passionate about. Maybe also could work with like-minded educators in Massachusetts, because I did my doctorate at Northeastern, and I had an opportunity to meet some educators and administrators in the Boston area. But because I don't live there, I don't have the same ability to network with people. And I try to do it here in New Jersey, in the New York area. But I really am. I saw a lot of schools, like I mentioned, Hingham High School, and there are a few others that have student clubs, like global citizenship student clubs, where they do experiential learning projects. Trying to think of another. I know Hingham is one. There's a few others in the greater Boston area. So yeah, I'd be happy to collaborate and network and connect with those who are interested in doing that, because I want to get this course approved. And I mean, hopefully the goal is to get it approved at the state level, because then it could be an elective course. I was working to try to get this approved in Texas, actually, through their the Texas Agency of Education, because they have these, they're called innovative courses, where they can adopt these elective courses that are approved. But I know every state has a different process for getting it approved, and there's a lot of bureaucracy there. But
I'm totally gonna do it, because the kids have a 15-day cycle, and if I go through the intros like the first day, and if I give them 2 through 9, and then after they get a lesson on that, then they can choose. I like that choice. They can do a deep dive research into one of those, whatever number that is. I'm not going to add right, eight, whatever, and then they would have to then do an action plan at the end. I'm like, it's 7 o'clock.
And they could do like a presentation to their, for their peers, or they could create a website or something that's like interactive. I mean, there's so many different social media and online platforms that we have access to now that we're learning about in this virtual world that we're living in. So
We're doing media literacy now, so it'd be nice after they have media literacy then to be able to do this. So I will definitely email.
Yeah, email me, and I'd be happy to share any resources that I have, and work with all of you. I'd love to do that. So thank you for those questions. I appreciate that.
So I think focusing this as as an elective course, it's kind of just the tip of the iceberg, right? I think further down the line, what we want to do is to kind of think about it at a macro level. And this is kind of going back to Lamerchi's point about the prerequisites.
Yeah.
And the idea is maybe thinking of, expanding it to a global citizenship strand that something starting at elementary level and working its way through high school. So that in every social studies course at a particular grade level, there is this global citizen strand that kind of focuses on one topic or one focus that's embedded into the core academic course, right? So if it's US history, you can look at various, topics that is integrated with the US history course. And then the same thing with world geography. With geography, you can focus on climate change, environment, political conflicts,
migration, all of that.
Cultural conflicts, and so on and so forth, so that by the time they get to, I'll even say, the 8th grade, the 8th grade could be that first phase of students developing their own civics project. Because here in Massachusetts, there's a civics engagement project requirement. And all schools in Massachusetts, they have to put together a student-led, nonpartisan civic project. And so this could be this could be a bridge, in terms of thinking of the kind of project that a student would want to do, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be American civics, but they can take on the lens of a global citizen. That's still a civics project, right? So when you talk about sustained development, you talk about water conservation, you can talk about climate change. And, if you've already started developing, the stepping stones from elementary up to the 8th grade, they should have enough knowledge, think about the kind of project that they want to do. And then you can kind of continue that as they go into the high school. Because the civic project is not just for 8th grade, it's also for high school too. So students could actually continue with that project after 8th grade. And then you would have this global citizens course that could potentially become a required capstone course that would be offered in 11th or 12th grade. So I'm just saying that what you're looking at is that the very first phase of the first phase, you're just at the tip of the iceberg, but now it's just a matter of how can you expand it.
Right, and that's why hearing your input and the input of everybody here is great, because I know you as a Gorman, as a K through 12 social studies coordinator, you're looking at more, and I need to start doing this as well, looking at more from a macro perspective of how do we get this in at an early age, so by the time they get to 8th grade, and then hopefully by the end of grade 12, they have the knowledge to do that type of project, some type of capstone project after 8th grade, and then a civics project, and then capstone project at the end of 12th grade. And starting at a young age where they get exposure to one of these topics each year, building up, that's, I think, a great idea. So yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to work with you if there's an opportunity to do that, because I'm really passionate about this. I'm trying to turn this into again, this is my idea. Now I want to put it into practice. And
I'm like,
I'm sorry.
I'm doing it.
Yeah. I know. And let me know if you need any resources. I have a lot of resources for each of these topics, because I'm thinking about just from like the UN, Oxfam, some of these organizations, they actually have already like frameworks in place by like the end of grade 4 or by the end of grade 8, by the end of grade 12. This is where students should be on each of these topics. So you're giving them some broad exposure at the beginning, kind of helping them understand what these topics are about, helping them shape their worldview a little bit by the time they get to middle school, and then go a little bit more in depth by the time they get to high school. So as you said, they should all build on each other. The curriculum should be set up in a place where every unit builds on each other over the course of 12 years.
I'm really excited. I don't know why my sounds so weird, but I'm super excited. And I'm going to launch off. I'm going to give them pictures of my daughter's passports and ask if they have to research what's similar, what's different. And they're going to figure out like, well, what is this? Like, why does she have 2? What does that even mean? Because I think kids don't even understand what a passport is and why it's important and what it stands for. They're just like, you just have to have it to travel.
Yeah, a lot of them don't even have passports, because if you don't travel outside the country, you don't need a passport. I mean, there used to be a time where you didn't, I know you can go to Canada years ago, you didn't need a passport, then it changed like 20 years ago. But yeah, I mean, I think for them, it's just to help them understand, our place in the world. And as you said, even things like, again, what a passport is, what does it mean to be a citizen of the world? Because everyone thinks of their citizenship being defined by their nation state, but in fact,
She's got to.
Right, exactly. And there you go.
Yeah.
There are people who have multiple passports, and they decide which one they want to use.
That. And
yeah, depending on where.
There's also some places in looking at the early history of the African American people here. David Walker in 1829 wrote Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, and the travel that people who were formerly enslaved or escaped from traveling the world and seeing themselves in a global space, that this technology now allows us through this machine to go anywhere. But in terms of their travel and mapping the globe with the position of social justice, abolition of slavery, all of that made them global in their perspectives. And so this is not new. It is. Our focus is new now. This is like forever.
This has been going on for hundreds of years. It's just accelerated now because of the age of the internet and all the new technologies that we have. And we have more abilities to connect with our fellow peers. I even think now more than ever in a post-COVID-19 world, because if you think about it, yes, there's going to probably be less travel over the next few years, but it doesn't mean we can't work with our counterparts around the world through some of these initiatives that I'm trying to foster and that others have fostered, because we're going to be redesigning how work is moving forward. I think there's going to be less people who are, less companies who are requiring their workers to travel, of course, but also to come to work they're going to be doing more telecommuting. Same thing for the classroom. So now that we have Google Meet and Zoom and all these different platforms, why don't we use them to, as you said, connect with teachers and students in other countries who are doing similar things, great things, but that our students never in the United States never have access to or never have an opportunity to work on. I was looking at a few years ago, there was students who were, I think, around in high school age, wrote this international white paper, and they're students from all different countries who work together in defining like what it means to be a global citizen and kind of like all the different components that constitute that through it was through UNESCO, I believe, and they met eventually in Ottawa where they kind of finalized all the different things. So we need to get students engaged at a young age, but younger than even high school, as you said. Elementary and middle school is the critical time, I believe. So by the time they get to high school, then you can actually delve into a course like this. Because you said it's going to be hard to go into a course like this if they have no prior knowledge to any of these topics. In a college course, it's different, right? Because you can do that and as a semester survey course. But I think when they're younger, it's harder for them to really appreciate it. So. But as Gorman says, if you can start at a younger age, and then by 8th grade, require that as a civics project, and then 12th grade, do the capstone project, I think that would be great. So, yeah, and Dia, that is a great idea about the passports. I think that'd be a great way to kind of start out when the first unit, like, or first day, like, what is a global citizen, and kind of introduce
That's real.
how people have passports from multiple passports, 2, 3.
Yeah, and I found out this one's expired, which we didn't know.
Oh. Well, luckily now no one's going anywhere, so you don't need.
No, so we brought them for like real because we're like, we don't know what's gonna happen in November. So we brought all of our passports, and my partner's European, he's Austrian, so they have these and our US ones. So in case we need to like just get over the border, we can get over with these. But like, and I could just be the immigrant anyway.
Yeah.
Our passport.
I mean, you're right. I mean, because they have exceptions, like the travel ban's been in effect since March. But like if you are a citizen of or permanent resident of some of these countries, like in Canada, for example, you can still go across the border. You have to quarantine for 14 days. Same thing, I guess, for Europe. But I only have one passport, so I wouldn't be able to do that as an example.
Yeah, no, and that's why we're like, it's an asset now. But I think, students just understand the interconnectedness of the world, because I agree with you that they don't teach history really in schools, but it's like, it just needs to happen. It's actually imperative, especially the global aspect, because if we trash and ruin this planet, there's nothing left for us. So.
That's right. There's no plan B. I don't think Mars is a good plan B. Cold, right? No, you're right. I mean, and I think the other point is like Gorman mentioned, like a lot of these topics that are we could teach in a U.S. history course are still relevant to what we would learn in a global studies course, because even though a lot of these issues require global solutions, they're problems that are affecting the United States and the broader world. So we, at a minimum, need to know how we can address it in this country. And then once we do that, then we can work with the broader communities around the world to do just that. So these are topics like in sustainability and all these other issues, poverty, affect us as a country and the wider world. But we can do this in both courses, in a US and a world history course. It doesn't only have to be taught in a world history course. I think that's an important point that was raised. So I mean, a lot of good ideas, but no, I'd be happy to just kind of think about, because I don't even know like the process that you have to kind of go through just to, like, let's say Massachusetts, for example, to get that. I don't know, Gorman, if you're like aware, like the process to kind of get that approved at the statewide level, let's say through the Massachusetts Department of Education.
Do you know it, the Mass DOE? But
I know Ruben. I know Ruben, and but like he can't make something happen. But I mean, like I can develop a mini course because my school gives that flexibility, and as long as I attach standards to it, Common Core and the frameworks, I know that. And I mean, so what's happening now is like everyone's developing stuff all over. Like primary source is developing stuff. I know iCivics is developing stuff. And so I'll even reach out to Natasha Scott, who used to be for Boston Public Schools, but now she's at iCivics, and just being like, hey, I took this interesting, because I know she actually emailed me, they're developing stuff right now.
Yeah. So exactly.
It starts at like at the grassroots level. I think that's probably one of the most effective ways, and being able to, because the way I see it right now in this state, the big need among teachers is, okay, we're required to do some type of civics engagement project. Where do I start? I don't even know where to begin.
Right.
Grade 8 curriculum is packed as it is. I'm now expected to now add another component of a civics engagement project on top of everything else. So I think that teachers are constantly looking for ways to do something, and I think, this kind of initiative might be an eye opener for many teachers in thinking about, okay, um, how can we incorporate this into our existing curriculum as a way to prepare students to do a civics project, and in this case, a global civics project.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like the first
We
approach. And then,
right.
of course, the network, a number of teachers have some connection or some in with somebody
Right.
who worked with the Massachusetts Department of Education.
Yeah.
So it's just getting that word around, and where you can have a small cluster of teachers developing these kinds of projects might then become, um, a high interest of the department to think about, okay, is this the kind of project that we could support, that we could promote, because it is addressing a need that, or the expectation that the state wants. So
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'd be happy to, to speak with, faculty members, let's say in a particular school, because I know that there are also a lot of different programs in place, courses that are offered to help train teachers on these issues. So I took, for example, a couple of years ago through Teachers College, an online course it was 3 weeks on teaching the Sustainable Development Goals. And at the end of the course, you came up with a lesson that you could incorporate in your own class on one of those topics. So kind of just to help them gather resources, because there's so many resources out there already that a lot of teachers are not going to have to reinvent the wheel on these topics. It's just knowing where to pool all your resources for each of these topics, because a lot of these international institutions already have created curricula that lay out a lot of these goals. So I just mentioned a few, Oxfam and UNESCO and a few others. So yeah, so I guess you said starting at the grassroots level and then kind of going from there, I think is a good approach. Yeah. So let's I'll I can share any resources that any of you would like, and then in terms of what you would want to include, let's say in your particular school or in the district, and then we could go from there. So you can email me, and I'd be happy to do that. So Dia, when are you planning on starting or incorporating this year? You plan?
So yeah, so I'm thinking I would try to develop it now and then like do it in January.
Yeah.
So January, February, March, because we have this block in our school called EPIC, which is like this like kind of project-based learning, like kind of experimental block just in general. So I did it last year and just made my own PBL course. And then
Cool.
I think I won the award for that. Like, honestly,
wow.
I was like,
yeah.
So I wanted to do it, with this kind of, plus this is just interesting. Like I've been just super interested in what you're saying. Cause I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Right.
Right.
And I think students will be fascinated as well, just because it's just fascinating and also eye-opening, because I know they have not at all probably heard of any of that. Right. Maybe climate change, because I've told them about that, but like, yeah.
Yeah. As you said, these are relevant topics. They're interesting, topical issues that are facing the world right now. I mean, if you, so like I found just when I've taught, I teach world history, just when I've incorporated these topics into my course at some point during the year, students are always really engaged and have so much to say about this. There's never a dull moment when you're talking about these issues, whether it's climate change or sustainability, poverty, whatever. I tried to also create units that are particularly relevant and that people would be interested in as well. Because I could have chosen some other topics as well, but you got to pick 10 units, and there you go. But There's your daughter. She's saying hi. What's your name?
Oh, thank you. What's your name?
Phoenix.
I
Oh,
Phoenix.
nice to meet you. How old are you?
Thank you.
How old are you?
He.
3.
Hey.
I have a 5-year-old too. They're just
Oh.
they're like no more readings, but then they're like whatever, she's doing it, so we can't stop her.
That's great. So yeah, look, I'd be happy to share. Can you? I have your email address. You can email me and I'll share. And I'm going to copy the email address as well. And maybe Corbin, you
Can
could.
you share your email address again? It went by so fast.
Yeah, let me put that up again. Sorry. Oops. There you go.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, just email me and I'd be happy to share all that. So yeah, thank you for attending and for engaging. I think it actually was really great because there were only a few of us, but we really had an opportunity to discuss. Sometimes when you have a large group, it's hard to talk about these types of issues and really get into the weeds of how we can implement it at the K through 12 level. So
Thank you again. This is the best one so far.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. I appreciate your kind words. It's really nice, and thank you for. I'm really happy that you're going to actually teach this material. That makes
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and thank you as well for everyone for the questions. It's really great.
Yeah,
So,
no, great. Thank you, Evan. We'll be in touch.
yeah, we'll be in touch, and I look forward to staying in touch with all of you. So please email me.
Okay.
Yes, definitely we will.
Have a wonderful rest of your day and week. Thank you.
You too. All right.
Yeah,
Have a
bye.
good night.